Hi there! In this video I'm going to walk you through my process for creating this lovely collage. This is a response to the prompt plan, which is the first prompt for Mindfultober 2024, but you definitely don't need to be following along with Mindfultober to take part and enjoy what we're going to do. So to follow along, you're going to need some paper, some scissors, some glue, pencil, possibly an eraser. Now I am going to be using my Botanical Collage workbook, which is available on my website. It's a free resource, so I'll be linking to that down below. The workbook includes a template that I'm going to work from, and it also includes some printable collage papers that you can use for this project. If you would prefer to make your own collage papers, then that's fantastic too. You'll just need a few extra art materials and some different types of paper to work with. If we haven't already met, my name is Mel. I'm an artist and educator, and I'm a top teacher on Skillshare, where I teach mindful art and drawing for beginners. So the intention of Mindfultober is to be a little bit different from other drawing challenges, in that we want it to feel really kind of calm and relaxing. So we want you to just take the prompts and explore them in whatever way feels right for you. You don't have to spend a long time working on them. There's no rules about the particular material that you can use. We just want it to be a really nice kind of opportunity for you to create some artwork just for yourself and really try and tap into the mindful qualities that you can get from working directly with these prompts. So in response to the theme of plan, I wanted to work from the template in my Botanical Collage workbook. Now I want to work from the template in a way that maybe you wouldn't think of working from a template. I think when we think about the idea of a template, we sort of immediately think, oh, I must trace it and copy it exactly. But actually I want you to think of it more as a plan rather than something that you have to stick to rigidly. So I'm going to use this as my plan for the collage, and then I'm also going to use the prepared collage papers which are included in the workbook. As I said, that's linked down below if you want to grab your free copy and follow along exactly with what I'll be doing. So it's quite a nice sort of easy way to get yourself eased into making collages, because you know, using these collage papers just means that you know, you don't have to worry about making your own collage papers this time around. It might be that that's what you'd like to do next, but you don't have to. So I am going to just start with thinking about probably the biggest shape in my design, which is going to be this sort of large flower shape. So I'm going to cut it as big as I possibly can. So I'm going to use this sort of reddy colour that I have here. So I'm just going to take that one off and start with a sort of really big curve. Now, the thing that's really lovely about not tracing a template as such, but just using it as a plan and as something to give you just something to follow, is that it kind of helps us to have those training wheels on when we're using a template or a guide, but also you can still be tapping into your observation skills and being mindful about how you're putting this together. So I've got a sort of curve there, and don't worry about it being kind of even or accurate. Mine is a bit wonky. You can see, you know, it's a bit sort of steeper this side and a bit more gentle that side. This is totally fine. This, the way that I like to approach Botanical Collage is actually to give it a sort of folk style twist. And what I think is lovely about that is you can really embrace the imperfections when you do that. So that's what I'm kind of all about with collage. It's like just really tuning into just how you would like to approach it. So I'm not trying to create the same sort of number of scallops as I've got in the template. I'm just using it as a guide. So I've got those scallops there. I can always come back and you know, adjust these, change the shape, make it a bit smaller. I just want to have something to start with. So next, I think I'll create the sort of yellow bit that's going to go on the top. You don't have to follow the colour plan that I've created in the template if you're following along with my template. It sometimes is quite helpful to do that, but you can do it in whatever way feels comfy. So I'm thinking about which way I want the scallops to go. Do I want them pointing up or do I want them pointing down? I think I'm going to have them pointing up. So I'm going to sort of cut a gentle curve to sort of get this shape here. Let's see how that's looking. And then to sort of get it the right kind of width, I'm just going to put my other shape on top of it, and then just cut here up the sides. So you notice as well, I'm not actually drawing onto my collage papers and then cutting out. This is another way that I like to really play with collage, and rather than making it a sort of, I think it can almost become like almost a little bit boring if you end up just drawing all these pieces and then cutting them out. It becomes more of like a construction project than something which feels a bit more kind of creative. So that's why I kind of feel like I'd like to use the template as a guide and a plan, but deviate from it a little bit. So I've got my overall shape there, and now I'm going to leave, I don't know, a bit of a gap and then cut a sort of scallop shape. So what I think I'm going to do is actually just, before I cut the scallop shape itself, is just like roughly cut out that sort of curved shape which is parallel to that one. So that's going to give me the overall shape to follow. Right here. And I could, rather than having it as a straight line like that, if I were to stick it underneath what I've just cut out, that could be quite nice. So I could do something like that. So I'm just going to introduce some scallops. I'm sort of roughly following that shape of the top. And we could do something maybe a bit like that. That could be quite nice. Or if I want to keep that as a straight line, I could just stick it over the top, and that would also be really nice. Now this is kind of quite a lot bigger at the moment than the size of my template, but that's fine. It's still fitting on the paper. But one thing that I do think is quite helpful to bear in mind when you're working with collage is that it's easier to make your shapes smaller than it is to make them bigger. So I think, you know, starting big and then potentially trimming them down is the way to go. So now I'm going to maybe think about this dark blue band that will be going sort of on there. So I'm going to, again, use the shape that I've already cut to get a general idea. Of how that shape should look. And I can pretty much cut up the sides as well so that I know it's roughly the right width. Again, I can adjust that later. And then let's see if I just initially just cut it as a straight line and see what happens. Okay, so that's quite nice. I'm going to need to adjust some of the widths here, but that's fine. I just want to have a rough sense of all my shapes at the moment. Okay, so then going to be thinking about the stem of my flower. So in my template, I've got just a straight piece and then this kind of bit fanning out that's kind of holding the flower in it. So I need to bear in mind, I could do this two ways. I could either cut the two pieces separately and then kind of join them, or I could cut it in one. I think it's actually easier, I think, to cut the two pieces separately. So I think I'm going to do that just because it feels a little bit easier to do it that way. So I'm thinking that that's going to be sort of the length of my stem, and then that's going to be my the sort of flowery part. So I have been really enjoying collage recently. This is why I wanted to use collage for the Mindful Tober prompts. I just feel as though it's a really beautiful process to tap into mindfulness. One of the reasons why is that I think when we are collaging and we're cutting out shapes from paper, particularly if we're doing it this way without having drawn on the shapes first, it's really engaging our mind and all of our senses. So we're having to use our eyes and our hands in conjunction, that hand-eye coordination, in order to create the thing as we're trying to make it look. And I think that can really help us to stay present with the thing that we're making, with the art making. I'm going to actually take this stem from the side of this block of blue, just so it leaves me a bit more to play with if I want to use any more. So collage is something which I return to an awful lot in my work. I find that it's an amazing process for if you feel a bit creatively blocked or stuck, or you just are getting very overwhelmed or kind of worried about working on the blank page. Collage can really help with all of these things because it's not permanent, as you'll see. You know, this is going to be changed a bit before it sort of becomes the final version. So you can change things, adapt. You know, it's such a fun and kind of freeing way to make art, because you can make something, if it's not quite right, you change it and you make something else before we're actually committing to doing things on the page itself. You know, we're not like when you work with a pen or pencil directly onto the piece of paper. I think there's more pressure with that because, you know, it feels, although obviously you can change it and start again, something in mentally, it feels more, there's just more pressure there. It just feels as though it's a little bit more more final, I suppose. So I'm going to sort of cut this into two, and then I'm going to cut as big a circle as I can for those leaves. Like I said, I can make things smaller, but making them bigger is a bit more of a headache. So okay, so almost there with getting the main shapes from my template or plan together. Those will go something like that. Okay, so I'm quite liking most elements of this at the moment. I feel like I would like to just slightly refine the size of the shapes going on up here in particular. So I just want to revisit this. I also want to just have a little experiment with playing around with just changing these bits slightly. So what would happen, for example, if I did this, or maybe put the blue stripe down a bit further. I think the only issue that I can see really is there's not much contrast between this part here and this part here, which is okay, but I think it's actually going to look better if I pretty much stick with how it is on the plan, on the template. So I'm just going to start refining that down. Now, what will actually be helpful for me at this point is if I can kind of join these pieces together so that I can start trimming down. So I'm going to just put a little bit of glue on the bottom of this piece to join it on. And at this point it just makes things a little bit easier then to start refining the cutting a little bit. And again, I think I'm going to stick the blue on top and then start to trim the pieces together. So I just want to reduce the size down a little. And now that I've stuck those pieces together, and I'm kind of cutting through them all at once, it's giving me a really nice sort of finished edge as well. There, that's much better. I quite like this, proportionately the piece that I've cut here for this is much bigger than it is appearing in the template, but I quite like it, so I'm going to leave it kind of large as it is there. And stick it in place. And then the stem, I'm just going to stick the very top of it, and I'm going to stick it behind the head of the flower. If I stuck it on top, it would look a little bit stuck on. So it just makes a bit more sense from a perspective point of view if it's kind of behind there. And now I need to think about these leaves. Now again, they are proportionately much bigger than I have them represented in the template here that I'm working from. But I quite like that. I quite like the exaggerated proportions. I just want to tidy them up a bit just because I did cut them quite quickly. So I'm just going to sort of tidy up that shape. There's something, the thing that's really lovely about folk style botanicals in particular is the way that shapes can be both simplified and exaggerated. This lends itself so beautifully to collage as well, because working in this way, you can see that I'm working to a plan by using this template, but I'm kind of deviating a bit and things are getting a bit bigger and a bit smaller. And that's what I really like. It just allows you to just play with things a little bit. So here, let's think, am I going to have them on top or behind the stem? What's going to work better? I think I quite like them behind actually. So at this point, I'm going to stick my big piece of flower down to the background. I'm using my template as a piece of scrap paper, but if you would rather not do that, I do recommend definitely use some scrap paper to do your gluing, so that you make sure to keep your sort of collage paper nice and clean for the background. So I'm going to stick the head of the flower down. I'm just going to leave that stem kind of loose for a moment until I've got the leaf stems with glue on. So I'm just going to put them behind. So I've got these leaf stems pointing up. Now, something that is lovely about collage as well is you can really experiment with what happens when you change very small things like the angles that leaves are at. You know, they can look great if they're pointing up, but they can also look great if they're going out sideways, or changing the angle that they're pointing at. It can actually have quite a big impact on how the whole thing looks. And even very small things like, you know, what angle do I want these to be at? You know, they have a pattern on them. That's sort of how I've prepared them. Do I want them to be at the same angle, or do I want the patterns to be at sort of different angles? Now, I think I quite like them when they're the same, or sort of in some way symmetrical to each other. So the whole design is quite symmetrical. It's another thing that, you know, is very often seen in folk art style botanicals is symmetry. So if I have the angle of those wavy lines going at this angle in this one, then I can sort of mirror it so that it looks symmetrical, which I think works quite well. I quite like it like that, I think. So although there is symmetry here, there's also small fluctuations and imperfections in that symmetry. So, you know, they're not exactly the same size. They're slightly different, they're slightly wonky. And these are all things that I think are fantastic. And it's what gives the collage its personality. And the way that you interpret how you're working from a plan, this is one of the ways that you can start to see your style emerge. So, for example, some people would approach this and they would be very meticulous and they cut the shapes out really neatly. They might do really kind of tight scallop shapes, and that would be that would show something about them and their style. It's just how they approach it. Whereas some people, like the way that I've approached this one, is kind of very loose and a bit more what I call loose and expressive. So it's just a very different approach. And neither are wrong or right, they're just different. And that's what is great about, just rather than using a template as a template and drawing around things or tracing, using it as more of a plan that you can, either stick to rigidly or be a bit looser with it. That's going to show more of your personality in the way that you approach art, and that's what I love. I have followed the template quite carefully and quite specifically, but you can start injecting your own ideas into it. So, use different papers, create your own collage papers, change the shapes a little bit, maybe change the proportions a little bit here and there where, you feel like you could inject something of yourself into it. I think this is a really nice way to talk about style, because people can get so stressed about it. I could, look at 100 people's examples that had followed this exactly, and they would all look slightly different. And that, I think, is where things get really interesting, because, we think that we're following something and it's not really ours, but we're injecting our own interpretation into it at every step of the process. So whilst you're cutting out your shapes as well, I think it's really nice to just really relax and ease into this process. That's why I wanted to show you an approach to an artwork where you're using a template or plan quite specifically, because I think it can take some of that pressure away. You don't have to be thinking so much about, oh, what am I going to draw? What's it going to look like? Worrying about whether it's good enough. You can blame me if it's not good, because you're working with my plan. And that hopefully is just going to allow you to sink into the enjoyment of it more, just really enjoying that immediate process with the paper and scissors and cutting and sticking. And it's super simple, but it is just so relaxing, and it can be such a lovely mindful process. If you're taking part in Mindfultober, then of course please do share your work on Instagram, and don't forget to tag me and the other hosts there too. If you're not taking part in Mindfultober, but you just love to share your work anyway, then feel free to tag me on Instagram anyway, or please, you're very welcome to come over and join my Facebook group, which is Mindful Art and Drawing for Beginners. I'll link to that down below as well. I'd love to see you in the group. If you enjoyed this video, it would be great if you could just hit that thumbs up button and also subscribe to my channel, because I do share a lot of other content like this. And I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.